Mom, I saw Dylan's dad make dinner. Like, actually cook, and it was straight fire. He said it was Blue Apron Assemble and Bake. All the ingredients showed up pre-chopped, and he just laid it out on a baking sheet, and no cap. Dinner was on the table in like 25 minutes. Apparently, it's chef designed, and it has like over 40 grams of protein. That's a lot, right? So maybe we try it. Just saying. You can be the next Dylan's dad. Blue Apron. Get $50 off your first 2 orders plus free shipping with code STIR50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
You're the last bastion of positivity. I know it. There's something good that's come out of the last week.
Yeah, my friend Joe, at JoeDiego24, pointed out today that we've come out the window with our top assist maker still in place, and that didn't look like it was going to happen, and having signed a player that's taken us to pieces 3 times, or perhaps even more than that, a proven Premiership player of great quality who may have the characteristics to go on to become a United legend. I'm having to borrow someone else's positivity this week because mine has all been focused on the kind of football doesn't really matter that much end of the spectrum rather than there's much good to say about the football itself.
Yes, well, so let's kick off with the transfer market. Might as well get all that out of the way because it's been somewhat bizarre in the last week and somewhat bizarre over the last sort of 8 weeks or so, I suppose. But United did sign 2 players. In fact, one was a Swiss Ghanaian right back who's 17 and we won't see for a few years, and the other was Marouanne Fellaini for £27.5 million.
Or the price that we bid 3 weeks ago for him and Leighton Baines. The thing about Fellaini, though, the final transfer fee, some discussion about whether it was actually 27 or whether it was 23 and the player himself paid £4 million. Effectively sacrificed a £4 million worth of loyalty payments from Everton by handing in a transfer request. So Everton inflated the announced fee by including that amount on the books.
Yeah, Everton denied this, and of course, I don't think I've seen a stock market announcement about this, but I suppose at some point it will be actually in United's filings, so the quarterly filings, so we'll know for sure. But no, I think that's complete rubbish. It was one of those rumours that went around, it's just simply not true.
Yeah.
So yeah, United paid £27.5 million. They had
Just let that sink in, lads.
I know. They had agreed £24 million, which is ridiculous in itself, given that the opening bid was £16 million, and that's about what he's worth, I suppose, if that. So, yeah, they'd agreed £24 million, but because Wigan were somewhat intransigent over the departure of James McCarthy and Everton had to pay more there, Everton passed the entire extra cost on to United. So, at the very last minute, with about 15 minutes to go in the transfer window, United end up stumping £3.5 million extra for £4 million over the price they could have had him not 4 weeks ago.
I've seen a few people, there's been so much back and forth amongst fans and infighting and stuff about this all, but I've seen a few people going, how can you quibble over a few million quid if he's the player we need? And it's like, I'm not really quibbling with his actual valuation. I'm quibbling with the way in which the amount of money we have paid for him is directly related to the staggering level of incompetence and poor planning we have displayed all the way through this pathetic excuse for a transfer window.
Yeah, no, quite. Look, I agree with you. I mean, there's that old saying, it may or may not have been said by Matt Busby, but money in the bank, I'd rather see it on the pitch. In the end, it doesn't matter that much, and it shouldn't really matter to fans whether United spent 5 million or 50 million on Fellaini if he's the right player. Now, I happen to think he's not the right player on his own. Look, we need numbers there, and he is a proven international, although, not first choice in his own position in the Belgian team, I might add. But, there's an extra body there. He's an experienced player. He is proven in the Premier League. And so, it's hard to quibble with that. There's an extra player there. That's good. But the way United went about it and the fact that they've missed out on that other player, the stellar player, is going to have a big effect, I think. But look, Fellaini's only one of the complete and utter cock-ups this summer. Would you like to go through the rest of them? Because there's a lot. Maybe we'll take it chronologically. Thiago. That was pretty embarrassing. We really, really want this player. Please, Barcelona, will you sell him to us? Thiago, would you like to come to United? I'll think about it. Now, let me just go and talk to Pep Guardiola's brother about that one and see if he recommends it.
And did he in the end?
Funnily enough, Pep Guardiola's brother did not recommend it amongst Thiago's management team there. And off Thiago went to Bayern Munich. Now, you couldn't really blame the lad, could you? You know, European champions, his mentor is manager there, but United got played significantly, and not the first time this summer. And you come to realise, and this is desperate times when you come to realise this, that David Gill managed to navigate the transfer market in a fairly sane fashion, didn't he? I mean, he's one of the most connected men in European football, and those connections paid off. Now, he's a duplicitous bastard, and I don't want us to start pretending he was some kind of god or anything. But, you know, old capable hands was actually capable in comparison to Ed Woodward.
I mean, yeah, so that's Thiago out of the way. A complete catastrophe. I mean, in some ways, if it had ended there, I wouldn't have felt particularly bad towards the club, because that one, as soon as Guardiola said, yeah, I'm interested in the player, that one was all over. Oh, you want to go play for the European champions where your mentor is their manager now? Oh, all right then. I think most people are going to do that. So that one I feel like is fair enough. Then comes, well, for me, I have to say, even with all the stuff we're going to come to about the comedy disaster of the final day, the absolute nadir of this transfer window, the fruitless and bizarre, lengthy, public, disgracefully humiliating chasing of a player who spent years trying to get a move to his boyhood dream club, where he now is plying his trade.
Well, United got played massively. So look, the timing was bizarre, that one. The opening bid, which was 26 million euros, which, you know, let's be honest, is pathetic. Is pathetic for Cesc Fabregas. What was the point? So even if he was transferable, which we now know he wasn't, even if he was, that was pathetic. But it came 24 hours after Fabregas's understudy had just left Barcelona. You know, do you think Barcelona might have been in the mind to let him go? You know, clearly not. And Fabregas played United. He used United's interest to leverage the new management and the club and make sure that he was one of the key players at the club, and it was known, and he got the assurances he wanted. And it is so blatant, and it was pretty obvious straight away, let's be honest. And sure, behind the scenes, I'm sure that United got noises that in some fashion he was interested. But there was quite a substantial amount of lay people who really don't know about these things, but could guess and can see a scam when they see one. They could guess that wasn't very real.
I mean, it's one of those things where you look at it happening and go, well, it must know something we don't, right? There's one of two things going on here. A mind-boggling level of incompetence, or they know something we don't know. Sadly, it would appear very clear which one of those two things it was.
Yes, Ed Woodward knows nothing, no. So Thiago and Fabregas, it was getting pretty embarrassing by this rate, but, you know, Ed Woodward, who dashed home from Australia for urgent transfer business, still on the boat somewhere, I believe.
Apollo Tyres does not sign himself.
Oh, this is true. So off we go to move on to Plan B, which appears to be... I mean, there was quite some gap in between Plans A and B falling and Plan C and D being enacted, which was Fellaini and Herrera. And United took some time to get moving on this one, but finally, in the last week of the transfer window, attempted to seal a deal for Ander Herrera. We'll come on to that one. And a little bit before that, had made a couple of bids for Fellaini and Leighton Baines as a joint package, which was pretty odd. The £28 million bid being labelled, insulting and derisory. Apparently is also a description for the size of my penis, according to Twitter, but in reality, the big unit, as I like to call him, Marouanne Fellaini.
Yeah.
Did not arrive at United in July because that bid wasn't acceptable, and that valued Fellaini at 16 million and Leighton Baines at 12 million. I think we said that was probably the wrong way round. It just irked Everton, and there's all sorts of games played in the transfer market, but what you generally haven't seen United doing is insulting the clubs that they're trying to work with.
And I think that, there was a lot made of the fact that Everton came out publicly and said that was an insulting and derisory figure. But given that they eventually ended up having to pay 27 million, more than 20, just almost that amount, $500,000 less than that amount for one of the two players, it just shows you what a staggering amount United missed the valuation for. And what's really most extraordinary about this, I kind of, if Woodward and Moyes combined have a disastrous time trying to negotiate with Barcelona, you can put that down to inexperience at negotiating at the top level of transfers. But when it comes to negotiating with Everton, how they are not negotiating from a position of informational strength is just beyond me. I mean, the fact that I basically assume that there's more to the release clause story than we know with Fellaini. That it's not as clear cut as he just had a £23 million release clause in his contract to get out, if you bought him by a certain point and then that clause expired.
There wasn't a lot of secrecy here, though, Paul.
No.
Everton were quite open about it. Everyone knew about it. It's £23.5 million and it expired on July 31st. It opened on the day of the transfer window, which was this year, 20th of May. The transfer window opens the day after the season finishes.
Yeah.
And expired on July 31st, so Everton would have time to replace the player. And they said all along that they will not be selling him on the cheap if no one buys him before the release clause expired. Why would they? And the fact that no one bought him for £23.5 million tells you the market did not value Marouanne Fellaini at £23.5 million.
Absolutely. And it also tells you that there's one of two things going on. Either Moyes didn't particularly want to have to sign Fellaini, which I suspect is not the case. I think Moyes probably very much wants Fellaini as part of his squad. Or this notion that there was somehow an unlimited sum of money to play with is just complete dreamland stuff, not, balderdash and piffle, as I ended up describing something on Twitter the other day. Because, right, either he doesn't want him, he's not going to pay the money, he's going to try and buy other players instead, or United, he can't spend that money on Fellaini before that thing goes ahead, because then he won't be able to afford his real targets.
Look, so I spoke to a couple of people at the end of the last transfer window last summer, and I can't remember whether I talked about this on the pod, but I was certainly talking to some people on Twitter about this, that the assumption was that there was not a lot of cash available after the Van Persie deal because his wages are so high, gross, near enough 10 million a season, and a £24 million fee, and the Glazers in their budgeting add wages and fees together, and United's wages have been going up substantially, new Rooney deal, deals for all the young players and all of that, right? So that was what I'd spoken to someone about a year ago. And this summer, someone else said this on Twitter, and I retweeted it, and Mark Ogden from The Telegraph came back straight away and said, this is nonsense, because, of course, United had been giving it the big I am. And so I'm half-minded to believe that there actually wasn't a lot of money in the transfer pot this time round, despite all the noises coming out. I said only half-minded to believe because, actually I think in reality they were prepared to spend some money, but they were so incompetent. But, I'm half-minded to believe that perhaps there wasn't a lot of money as well, and they were hoping to negotiate the Fellaini fee down. It's interesting because I wonder whether some of this isn't Ed Woodward's experience and mindset, because when he's trying to do a deal in his previous role as head of United's commercial operations, everybody wants to come to United. They are beating down the door to sign deals with United. He's selling, of course, but it's his market. United are in a position of strength. In the transfer market right now, United aren't really, because not only are there other illustrious clubs around Europe, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Barcelona, but there are also a whole bunch of extremely wealthy clubs out there. So Chelsea, Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, Monaco, used to be Anzi Makalakalakala until they went belly up. And so United now are not the preeminent payers in the market, right? So it's challenging and it's a whole different dynamic. And I wonder whether Woodward has found that rather difficult.
Absolutely. And I think also Moyes has come from a culture where this was, I believe, James Richardson said this on the Guardian podcast, that Moyes comes from Everton, where everyone that they're negotiating with knows that they don't have very much money to spend. And so when Everton offer an amount of money and say this is the most we can go to, the selling club knows that, well, there's probably some wiggle room in that. There is not that much wiggle room in that. They are dealing with very limited finances. But with United, ultimately, if you hold out, if they want your player enough, at the last minute, they can come and immensely overpay for not the very top level of talent. They've done it time and again in recent seasons.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, of course, Moyes wasn't intimately involved in a lot of the transfer negotiations. It has tended to be Woodward and some of the other team. But, hey, maybe that has played into it as well. Anyway, look, we've gone off track a little bit. So there was Fellaini, Baines, Thiago and Fabregas. And that all rumbled on during the summer until we came into the last week of the transfer window. And we flipped to Ander Herrera, which United have actually been watching for some time. And I remember talking about him when Bilbao smashed United a couple of seasons ago. He's been absolutely excellent in La Liga, mostly in a defensive role. Have to say, he plays in a kind of deep role. He's very, very neat and tidy in possession. He likes to tackle. He's kind of all-rounder in midfield. And personally, I was quite excited about the thought of acquiring him because I think he would have done the exact opposite that Fellaini would have done. He would have made United tick over nicely, pass, move. He's got a short passing game. He's not necessarily too safe with his passing, but he's very, very accurate with it. Whereas Fellaini is going to be something completely different in the middle of the park. So I was quite excited about it. I've seen the guy play a lot of times, thought, yeah, very high quality player, bit expensive, mind you, at 36 million. But if United are prepared to pay that, which it seems like it is, then that's great. But of course, United were not prepared to pay the buyout clause, even though the world and his dog knows that Bilbao, because they have a tiny pool of talent they can pick from, do not sell unless they have to. I mean, they did exactly the same with Llorente and they did exactly the same with Javi Martinez. They do not sell unless they're forced to.
The real crime with Herrera was trying to do a deal with Bilbao in what looked like a week, because it can't be done.
If he was plan B and Fabregas and Thiago were plan A, or, A, B and C, why wasn't it done much, much earlier?
Even if United were prepared to pay that buyout clause, they still probably would have needed more than a week to get it done because of the tax complexities and the legal complexities of Spanish buyout clauses, right? It is not a straightforward matter. You don't just bung 36 million and then that's it.
Yeah, well, you do if you're a Spanish club, but yeah, of course, if you're a foreign club, it's very different. But we do have examples now, there is precedent set. And the really infuriating part appears to be that United did not get the appropriate legal advice. They just didn't. So, they're going into the last week trying to force through a transfer. This bizarre situation where United, on the collapse of the deal on Monday, briefing that imposters had tried to go to the La Liga headquarters to deposit the money, and actually they'd pulled out because they couldn't negotiate, when it seems to be that these were not imposters. They're in fact lawyers who had acted on behalf of Bilbao and Bayern Munich in the transfer of Javi Martinez last year, and were there very much on United's instructions. And in fact, United just massively cocked up, and so they've taken the lesser of two evils and tried to look cheap rather than incompetent. Whereas
in fact they are very clearly both.
Yeah, indeed.
Which is a dangerous combination in the transfer market. And okay, so these are I guess the Herrera thing. I think I was very excited by the signing, and actually massively more excited by the idea of signing Herrera and Fellaini than either of them on their own. Because I think actually Fellaini adds very much needed options to United's tactical. He adds tactical options, right? He's much more destructive than anyone we've got in the midfield at the moment, which I think is a very good thing. And, against Liverpool, it would have been absolutely brilliant to have Fellaini there in the last 10 minutes, running around, pushing people out the way and headering stuff.
The option he adds in the last 10 minutes is hoof.
Well, yeah.
But is that good? One of the resounding successes of Ferguson's reign is that he's built team after team that's patient in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? Don't start launching it. And you wonder whether having Fellaini there will mean United do start launching it. And I say that because, think about England. When Peter Crouch plays, they played long ball football every single time. And I know this is England and, United is different and all of that. But the temptation will be there.
No, I agree. I've long said that Peter Crouch is a much better footballer than the teams he's in allow him to be. I don't mean good feet for a big man. I'm not saying that. But he just goes around ruining teams because midfielders see him out the corner of their eye and get overexcited. That's, they're like, oh, if I just kick it that way, he'll definitely get it. Look at the size of him. But I don't think Fellaini's quite like that. But anyway, I think, Fellaini running around terrorising defences is not a bad thing. I think having Fellaini in the side's great. And I think he's a very important addition. And potentially, I'm going to be reasonably optimistic about him in general. But yeah, not nearly as much as if we'd signed a ball-playing midfielder as well.
Well, look, we had that conversation before, and I'd feel much more comfortable about it as well. I mean, I've seen people say he could be United's Yaya Toure. He's not as talented as Yaya Toure. He's nowhere near as talented. Maybe he'll develop. Maybe he's a player that will go up a level at United. Maybe. I mean, he is 25. He's 26 soon. So you'd think he's pretty much the completed package. And I don't know whether you read the Belgo Foot website, but I can't say I often do. I just happen to follow him on Twitter, and he posted a link to an interview he'd done a while back, and in fact an interview he'd done in 2008 as well, and said very similar things on both occasions, which, this is a player who's not technically gifted by any means, but he will score goals, and he does like a tackle and an elbow.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, just to stick on Fellaini for a second, I think Fellaini will win us some games, but there is also the very real possibility that he'll lose us some games because he's going to do stuff and get himself sent off and all that kind of thing, and the spotlight is so much brighter if you play at United than if you play at Everton. Imagine if he was playing at United when he punched, elbowed and headbutted Shawcross in the same game. The level of media negativity and all that kind of stuff.
So my real worry is this, he gives the ball away a lot. Yeah, it's between, a fifth and a quarter of the time that he has the ball that he gives it away, which is a significant amount. He's untidy in possession. And he's been untidy in possession for quite some time at Everton, so not just when they used him up front and launched long balls at him. And so that's the major worry. I think the risk is not that he really elbows people, and maybe he'll do that, but the risk is that United gives away the ball too cheaply. And it's not a risk that's a big factor in the Premier League, but it most certainly is against top quality European opposition. And that's where it's going to become a problem. And there will be a goal that United concede, and it may well be a crucial goal where Fellaini has given the ball away in the wrong position.
Yeah, absolutely. And there will be a goal, and it may well be a crucial goal, where he scores a last-minute header from a Robin Van Persie corner.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a bad acquisition. Obviously, it was expensive. As you say, money on the pitch, not in the bank. Much rather see the money spent on players. My problem with the expense of Fellaini is not that it was too much, but that it was unnecessary and reflects United's overall incompetence. We haven't even touched on David Moyes accidentally saying that he bid for Gareth Bale.
Yeah, which was a really bizarre one, and we talked about that one on the pod. Quite clearly, he should have just said no. In fact, there's a brilliant story doing around. I have no idea if it's true. It seems preposterous that Real Madrid basically offered Bale a very, very multi-million pound bonus if United did not make an official bid, and the way United would not make an official bid is if Bale's people told them very clearly it would never be accepted. There's no way that he's going to United ever, right? Which I'm quite sure they did do that. That was really bizarre of David Moyes. I don't know why he did that. I suspect he just got kind of trapped in, this mentality that he's not going to answer a question in a straight manner.
Yeah, and also trapped in the mentality that we're the big boys on campus when it comes to transfers this summer, and we're in for Ronaldo. The fact that the papers are constantly running with stories about how we're in for Ronaldo, I'm sure a lot of that is just the kind of slightly false logic that says it's the sort of thing we might be into, but also there must have been some briefing from somewhere about all that.
Right.
The Bale thing, a story did the rounds on transfer deadline day. Again, this may well be apocryphal, that Ryan Giggs had been on the phone to Luka Modric to try and persuade him to send Bale to make sure that Bale knew that somehow he was still wanted at United. It seems completely insane. So there's that. The kind of Bale thing, the Ronaldo thing, the fact that Arsenal have signed Mesut Ozil and United were apparently offered him but balked at the price. What do you think of that? It's very clear that he is not, in inverted commas, the player we need.
No, I mean, he was a couple of years ago, and of course, I fell out with plenty of people by arguing that United should have pulled out the stops to do that deal 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, in fact. So, look, I think he's one of those players, when he's available, you just buy him, right?
Yeah.
You fit him in the side. One of the things that is interesting about Ozil, and we did talk about this, is that he's very good from out to in. He does play in the way that Moyes has used a number of creative players, albeit I wouldn't exactly trust Ozil to cover his fullback and defend in a straight 4-4-2 when he needs to, but he puts up the numbers. He puts up incredible numbers, goals and assists, and he moves players out of position all the time with his movement. Ferguson called him the ghost, didn't he, 3 years ago, and he loved him so much, really tried hard to get him, but finances weren't there. So I think United, if he's available, you go get him, and I think Arsenal have had such a massive boost from that transfer that it's going to carry into the season. Remember, Arsenal were being talked about in the same way that United are now, for some bizarre bidding during the summer and very little activity. And on the final day, they pulled out this massive morale-boosting transfer, and it's completely changed the nature of their season. I think it'll have a major impact on that club.
Absolutely. I do not think it's... Arsenal have still got massive problems, and, Ozil does not suddenly make their goalkeeper and defenders work properly, but will paper over cracks. Absolutely. I mean, Van Persie didn't make our central midfield be okay, but we walked the league because you just give him the ball and he scores goals. And Ozil is in the class, this is one of my least favourite expressions in the world, I can't believe I'm using it, but he is a game changer, not just on an individual game basis, but he changes the complete dynamic of Arsenal. They've become Arsenal are a different club today than they were 4 days ago.
So remember when I said a little while ago, Fellaini's not a game changer. Now, I don't mean individual games. I mean exactly the way you meant it in that latter one. He didn't change the nature of United's squad. He didn't up United level. Ozil, on the other hand, has done that for Arsenal. He has upped them a level. I'm sure of that. And, it's a fantastic transfer. Yes, it's a massive amount of money. Yes, they've probably overpaid, given that Real Madrid got him for, a fifth of what Arsenal have paid. But, he's going to make a big difference. And now that Giroud is scoring, Arsenal are going to score plenty of goals this season. Might leak quite a few too, mind you, but they're going to score plenty of goals.
And the thing is, I don't think there can be very many Real Madrid fans who think they've upgraded their squad over the summer by getting in Bale and shipping out Ozil.
No, they're very upset.
So anyway, that transfer, I think ultimately you could look at it and say big, powerful, destructive, tenacious midfielder, more what's missing from United than supremely gifted number 10. But there's a class issue. There's just a difference in quality. And I keep coming back to this point. Ultimately, I'm very pleased that we've got Fellaini. I do think he serves a really useful purpose in United's squad. And he's obviously got the relationship with Moyes and all that kind of stuff. And there's lots of positives about signing Fellaini. But we've been saying all the way through the transfer window, well, you in particular have said, whenever we've speculated on what's going to happen, you've said, I think what's going to happen is that we're going to end up overspending on mediocrity. And I think whilst, Fellaini's probably a level above mediocrity, nobody in their right mind would describe him as in the elite of world football, right?
No, right. So, anyway, look, I said that Mesut Ozil's nickname was the Ghost. It is apparently, great story in Red Issue, this month's Red Issue, the nickname that United's players have given Ed Woodward because they never see him. Nice little touch there. And look, if we think the first couple of months of the transfer window were embarrassing, it's nothing compared to the final day. And we've discussed the complete mess that was the Ander Herrera deal. But there were about 6 other deals United tried to put together on the final day. Fellaini, we know, Baines rejected, bid twice at 15 million. 4 bids for Baines this summer, 12 million, 12 million, 15 million and 15 million. Work that one out.
The thing that's wrong there is the bids don't go up. What you think is when the bid's rejected, you put another one in that's bigger if you want the player.
Yeah. But they added some magic beans as well.
Right. They would offer to play a friendly against Everton, right? Like in Football Manager.
Really horrible piece this is, but apparently, in the heat of the negotiations for Fellaini on Monday night, and it's getting down to the wire, United offered to forego the remaining monies that were due on Darren Gibson. Do you know how much they were?
No.
£200,000.
Bargain. Cheap at half the price.
Yeah, about 4 days' pay for Wayne Rooney. So, anyway, the other big deal that United tried to put together on the final day was for Sami Khedira.
What the hell was that about?
Really odd. Faxed over a €40 million, £34 million bid. Or emailed over. I just say fax because I just assume they use the fax, Maybe they've got around to email. I don't know. It's Ed Woodward. He probably Snapchatted it, didn't he?
He did.
He's all into branding and social media type stuff,
They just Instagrammed a picture of a written offer. No, of how people Instagram iPad notepad thing, the yellow thing with the lines. That's what they did.
Yeah.
We will offer you just the letter U, 34 million for Khedira, brackets lols.
Yeah, in Comic Sans type.
Yeah, absolutely. What the hell was that bit about, and why didn't that piece of paper say Luka Modric on it instead of Sami Khedira?
It's very odd, and I think it's very much about they had a very long list. I think there was a calculation here. that Real Madrid had just spent 100 million euros on Gareth Bale, and they wanted to make some or a significant amount of that back. And of course, they also spent 30 odd million on Isco and another 20 something million on Ilarengi. And so they spent a huge amount of money at Real Madrid and needed to get some money back. And the calculation is they're going to sell players. And I think everyone knew that Di Maria and Ozil were definitely available. No one said that Khedira was available. He's actually probably quite important given that Alonso is injured at the moment. But they tried to put that together. Of course, they were shot down far too late. No negotiations took place. Really, really bizarre. And it just gives the impression that United had no real strategy or plan here. And on the final day, when they hadn't got the players they wanted, just desperately faxed everyone possible. Used to be Tottenham's strategy. They seem to have got an awful lot smarter this summer.
Yeah, they have, and many people recommending that United put in a late cheeky bid for Daniel Levy in the transfer market, which I'm sure would have been a good move. Although, man, did he throw Gareth Bale under the bus. It's just like, we took the view that the player would not be committed enough. We had no intention of selling him, brackets, even though we've already spent all the money we're totally going to get for him.
Yes, they were definitely buying players on the tick. Imagine that hadn't worked out, that transfer. There's a very large bill to pay to Wonga.com yes. at the end of September.
Yeah, Papi Cisse would have not approved of that. It's always sad to see Papi in the Wonga shirt now after all that. But anyway, not the last of United's transfer deadline day disasters. Comical bid for Herrera, comical claim that imposters are walking around in our place, a joke of a bid for Khedira. And then we didn't get the paperwork right for Contrao. Now, apparently, this is all Real Madrid's fault, which I could kind of accept if we weren't trying to do the deal at midnight on transfer deadline day.
So of course it is partly Real Madrid's fault because they delayed because they were attempting to get Guillem Sequeira, but Granada, the Secunda B team, eventually loaned him out to Benfica. And so when the deal to Benfica happened and Sequeira was apparently in Portugal doing the deal when United put the bid in for Contrao, Real Madrid couldn't send Contrao out because they need 2 left backs. Anyway, this was all a bit odd anyway at the time because of course Contrao's full international cost Real Madrid some 30 million euros a couple of seasons ago. Very, very talented left back. I think not as good as Evra and not as good as Baines, personally. Can play in some other positions, but I have to say I think he's pretty dodgy in midfield. But it seemed a little odd because full international he'd be expected to play, and it kind of looked for a moment that Evra might be on the way out, but the deal wasn't done. Paperwork wasn't signed in time.
There's a left midfielder, who would cover the left back, and you play both of them, I think, Evra and Contrao. You could play them both in the same side.
Well, you could, but wouldn't you be playing a left back on the left wing? I mean, it's in most cases, a left back on the left wing looks like a left back on the left wing. Granted, I said this about Gareth Bale not 3 or 4 years ago, and he rather proved me wrong on that one, but I think that he's the exception.
Absolutely. I don't know. I got very excited about that bid for a second, just because it was announced as done. It wasn't announced as speculative.
Well, don't get me wrong. If he'd come, it would have been a very strong competition for a place, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just gave me the impression that, in fact, the whole summer has given the impression that Moyes, for some reason, doesn't rate Evra. He's just come off the back of a very, very good season. He was United's best player at Anfield by quite some distance. And we will come on to talking about some football at some point. He's still got a lot to give. And wouldn't it be better for United to get in a young player rather than a player on loan or an older player?
But I think the very real possibility exists that Evra's just going to keel over one day because of the amount of football he's played in the last 5 years. It's insane the amount of football he's played. And so to get very top level cover for Evra seems like a really good idea. And the fact that the Contrao deal was a loan instead of a full-time transfer, you think a permanent deal, then there was something about that just felt sort of right, really.
Yeah, so I'm not that bothered about it, although of course United managed to cock it up by not doing it much earlier. And I think the problem was that they kept bidding for Baines even on the last day of the transfer window, even though it was blatantly obvious that Everton were not prepared to sell, whereas they were prepared to sell Fellaini.
Absolutely. And it was just like the Fabregas deal. It was the same. It was like looking at it from the outside in, not being an expert by any stretch of the imagination, being an enthusiastic amateur, looking at it going, this isn't going to work. This is clearly, blatantly distracting time, resources, energy, attention away from a more viable plan B. Exactly the same thing with the Fabregas transfer and the Baines transfer. And I'm sure we have forgotten some of the catastrophes of this summer.
Let's talk about Daniele De Rossi and United's attempt it seems, to get the man on loan.
The most loyal footballer in the history of football.
Yeah, not only loyal to Roma, although there were rumours that he'd be prepared to leave earlier in the summer, and Roma were prepared to do a deal, but very loyal to his family, who, so says Tancredi Palmieri,
well-known, reliable super source.
Likes a tweet or two. So says he that the player is not prepared to leave behind his family. He's divorced and there's difficulties with his child and stuff like that. So anyway, it was an open secret, and United put the bid in anyway, knowing that it would surely fail.
Yep, so ultimately, the positive that you asked for 3/4 of an hour ago when we started talking about this is that United retain all their key players. Some people see it as a tremendous positive that we haven't lost Nani in the transfer window. I think that depends entirely on which Nani we've kept. We have not shipped out hardly any of the dead weight from the squad. Nobody could find a buyer for Makeda. Bebe's gone on loan, but don't do any harm either way, really,
No, he doesn't earn very much, and Makeda is dead weight. He's going to play the season in the reserves. He's 22 years old, so basically just a waste of his and United's time, isn't he? Anderson's still in the squad. I don't think Moyes rates him at all, so I suppose that's a blessing in a way, but he's dead weight there. And Nani, well, look, maybe we'll get the Nani back that we all would like to know, but we don't get often enough. If he plays on the right side of an attacking 3 or an attacking 4, he could come good again. It's all about confidence with him, and he needs to play regularly, and he needs to play on that right side. And then he's got plenty to give. He could put up the numbers. He's always going to be frustrating, but he could put up sort of 15 goals and 15 assists this season, and that's very good.
Yeah, and talking of putting up the numbers, the one player that we all thought that not all of us, but many of us thought the season would be carrying on without, he was swayed by the sheer love and adoration of the Stretford end. I know that's not true. Wayne Rooney is staying, and that's a huge risk. I mean, I think ultimately you'd probably say, well, that's a good thing for United, that when the transfer window closes, Rooney's still there. A lot of people have been saying, yes, for all the disaster of it, we've got a player in who's the type of player we badly needed, and we've kept Wayne Rooney, so it's not that bad a transfer window. But I really don't think it's that cut and dried that keeping Wayne Rooney is definitely entirely a positive. I think there's many positive aspects for it, but it's risky because he could cause a lot of problems this season. I've seen so many United best 11s doing the rounds on Twitter, which have Rooney either on the right or the left. I don't think he's going to feel that that's United's best 11 somehow.
No, and it'll be interesting to see what his reaction is, and if that happens. And it could well do, because Moyes does like to use players in, sort of attacking out-in players in those wide areas. So he could end up playing left. We'll see. And yeah, I agree. He's a massive risk, Wayne Rooney. On a personal level, I don't like the man. And after twice really working very hard to get out of the club, I know it's just a job for him, but he didn't even want the job. And so, there's the fan part of me that says, I don't really want him at United and be quite happy if he went. But of course, loads and loads of talent, and let's hope he applies it on the pitch. We'll see. I think it's almost impossible that we can get the best out of Wayne Rooney, given that he wanted to go.
Another player that we've kept, there was talk of leaving, I think much more of a simple positive that we've kept him, Chicharito, although he did tweet slightly passive-aggressively today, tweeting one of those terrible fact accounts saying something along the lines of people who are too nice are more likely to be taken advantage of. Bit passive-aggressive there, Javier. A little bit clear who you mean.
Interesting, yeah. So, he's got to get himself fit, and then let's hope he gets some games. But it's going to be really tough for him, because Moyes has painted himself into a corner with Rooney. He's going to have to play Rooney, isn't he? And Van Persie's undroppable, and Welbeck started the season pretty well, I think. So it's hard to say that Hernandez is going to get a lot of games this season.
No, absolutely. He was responsible for one of the very few highlights in the dreadful game against Liverpool, which we've managed to avoid talking about for quite a long time. But a lovely through ball for Van Persie right near the end of that game. Just beautiful waiting, and he really has improved his all-round game, and he's a huge asset to United. So I hope they can find a way to keep him happy.
So I want to round off our talk about the summer's transfer shenanigans with this question. So given everything that's happened since the end of last season, do you think United are net better or not? So Ferguson's gone, replaced by Moyes. Gill has gone, replaced by Woodward. And we've brought in Fellaini and a couple of youngsters. Are United net better now?
Well, there's definitely no under those parameters. But let's just concentrate on the playing staff for a second. I think the playing staff are definitely net better because Paul Scholes was, I mean, in terms of the level of sheer talent and brilliance, losing Paul Scholes was massive, but, you know, we lost him a couple of years ago and then he had a little, Indian summer right at the end there. But generally speaking, we'd lost Scholes a while ago. So if you don't count his loss, then, yeah, the playing staff's improved because we've not lost anyone and we've brought players in. But Ferguson going, there is no way. I mean, even if we had signed Fabregas and, I mean, if we'd signed Cristiano Ronaldo, then it gets a bit closer. But, you know, unless we'd signed Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi, I don't think there's any way we could have been net better at the start of this season. What do you think?
I think the new man came in and United absolutely had to do absolutely everything to give him all the resources he needed. And I think we're going to find out that Ferguson was worth quite a lot of points this season and United had to use this summer from a position of strength, if you want to call it that, having won the Premier League, but with a massive transition to make sure the new man had all the tools he needed. And I think any chief executive worth his salt would have realised that. And I think in the end, it will cost United this season. You know, I know I don't like to be doom and gloom, but I predicted before all the desperate shenanigans of the last 2 weeks came into play that United would finish third, and I think that's about right. Now, Chelsea and City do have weaknesses too. I think City are looking pretty good, actually. I think Pellegrini's got them into a nice unit quite quickly, although they did have that disastrous game at Cardiff. Chelsea have got some problems in that they don't have a proper striker, and you can't really call Fernando Torres that, and bizarrely, they've let Lukaku go, which is really, really odd, because why would you do that? Andre Schürrle's a midfielder, played up front, don't think it's his position at all, and they brought Eto'o in, and who knows what he's been up to in the last 2 years in Russia.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, that was one of the weirdest transfers of all on deadline day, and phenomenal for Everton. And I think really good for the player as well. Great for the player that he doesn't end up having to play second fiddle to Fernando Torres. And he's going to probably play more or less every game, isn't he? And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 15, 20 goals.
Well, you know, Everton got to congratulate themselves. They've got Lukaku in, very good. Got Barry in, you know, he's got his critics, but I think that experience there will be good for Everton in the middle of the park. James McCarthy's very good, very, very good player. Might struggle to justify £13 million, but, you know, still very, very, very good player. And managed to get £6 million for Victor Anichebe. Yeah, what?
That's actual cash, real money.
I think so. I think it's not monopoly money.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, I think a phenomenal transfer window for Everton. They're probably about net the same on the pitch and doing well financially out of all of those dealings. Oh, and actually probably net better, right, with Lukaku. But yeah, the question of whether United are net better or not, as you say, they in some ways, up to today, we've suffered more from the loss of David Gill than the loss of Ferguson, except that I think that our transfer dealings are lessened by Ferguson, because obviously coming to play for United is still extremely prestigious. But people don't know whether David Moyes is going to be a fantastic United manager. All the people out there listening to this podcast right now, completely and utterly convinced and certain that David Moyes is going to lead Manchester United to a sustained period of success based on his characteristics as a manager. I'm pleased that you believe that. I don't know how you think that with any certainty, because 10 years of experience running Everton does not prove that you can manage Manchester United. And coming to play for Ferguson's incredibly attractive to players all around the world, right? That's like an honour and a privilege and a once-in-a-lifetime chance to play with the best ever, or, you know, so we lost out on that. And, you know, David Gill sold the club down the river massively, but he was very good at transfers, you know, very good at all that stuff. And Woodward, you said it when we talked about this, you said this very thing on this podcast last season, that it's a huge gamble putting Woodward in that role, because to give a non-football person that job, I've seen lots of people saying, is this a structural problem? Do we need a director of football? And essentially, he's behaving as a director of football would in the transfer market, except without any experience of being a football man.
Yeah, and I think it's come to pass that that's a big error in United's part. You know, maybe he'll turn out to be a brilliant executive. He's certainly done very impressive things in the commercial market. Who else would be able to get United's players to drink a can of tomato juice and talk Japanese for money? But Woodward, he's done wonders there. But in the actual business of playing the transfer market, he's completely green and has been found wanting. You know, I'm not sure that I'm always in favour of this director of football role. It depends on the scope, right? So the scope as Joe Kinnear has got it is a bit close to the manager and it's causing problems. The scope as Franco Baldini has got it, which is simply to work his contacts in the market and put together deals and identify players and then go and get the right contract in place. That makes a lot of sense, and United are missing that skills. Whether they're missing the role, we'll see. Definitely missing the skills.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had numerous Twitter questions on this subject, my favourite of which from Bex at A Place to Hide, saying, what do you think Ed Woodward was actually doing instead of signing players? I go with a swivel chair. Whee! I think that's it. I think he was sitting there spinning around, just loving his new big chair in David Gill's old office.
Great story doing the rounds. Again, no idea if it's true. Ed Woodward was over at Everton trying to conclude the Fellaini deal late into the night, and Everton made him sit in reception for an hour.
That's like that episode of The West Wing where Bartlett goes to Congress and they make him sit outside, isn't it? Except that was a triumphant bit of political manoeuvring and Ed Woodward's was not.
There you go. So, shall we take a couple of questions and then we should probably briefly talk about some football, because United did lose a very big game.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. I'm going to delay it with ridiculous questions. At Gabrielle Mobatan, very good Twitter handle, says, what's your favourite pizza topping?
I like, what are those peppers called, those kind of sweet chilli ones, Raquito peppers, with some meat.
Fancy peppers that I've never even heard of. Cheese and mushroom, that's what I like. No meat, of course. All right, at Hussein United says, what's your favourite film?
Apocalypse Now, very, very good one. I'm sure one of the Godfathers, maybe two.
It's an official film hipster answer. I quite like Roberto Rossellini's Roma Città Aperta, which is Rome Open City. Bit of 1930s Italian neorealism. I also quite like Notting Hill.
It's a bit cheesy though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but I like it. I like some good feel-good stuff. But my very favourite films are, I really like Truffaut, but my favourite filmmaker ever would be Woody Allen, which is why I think it's an absolute crime that Spurs have got a fullback whose first name, he doesn't have to, but he goes by the name of Danny. His surname's Rose, and he doesn't have Broadway on the back of his shirt. Seems ridiculous to me.
It would be funny. Not one of Woody Allen's finest, though, I've got to say,
Oh, it's a great film.
I'm going with Manhattan and Annie Hall. I know that's the two you're supposed to pick, but yeah.
No, that is a perfectly reasonable shout, but I think Broadway Danny Rose is my favourite of the Mia Farrow Woody Allen films. That's many people, of course, would choose Hannah and Her Sisters there, but... At Red Devil 1295 asks, does Moyes chew gum? This is an important question that we need to look further into.
Don't think he does, but he does stare a lot.
That's true. At Jack K. Holt says, when our inevitable autobiographies are released, Ed, what are they going to be called? Also, what would Bebe's be called?
Down and Out in London Bridge. Down and Out in Lisbon.
Down and Out when the taxman comes round Carrington. I don't know what Bebe's would be called. I think it would be called On Loan to Some Club You've Never Heard of in Portugal. Mine would be called... I really should have spent a lot less time talking about football. That's what my autobiography will eventually be called.
I'm just going to go with a blank title. Words should speak for themselves.
Untitled, the Edward Barker story.
Yeah.
I like it. At Typical City, who keeps asking mean questions every week, this time goes with the secretly mean question that he knows is mean really, but is disguised as a not mean question. What score out of 10 would you give United's summer transfer window?
10. It was fantastic, mate.
Yeah, exactly. At White Pele 10 asks, she's got a choice now on Saturdays. Should she stay in and watch her number 1 Belgian, Poirot, or go to the South Stand and watch her number 2 Belgian, Marouanne Fellaini in action?
You go for the number 2.
You do. And then you use Sky Plus, the old Poirot. I wonder if Fellaini's ever watched Poirot. He must have done, right?
Oh, Belgians do. It's part of the culture, isn't it? Fact. As well as eating waffles and drinking beer.
Absolutely, and reading Tintin. These are the things we know about Belgium. It's time to talk about the Liverpool game. That was an unedifying spectacle, wasn't it?
It was utter gash. Really, really poor from United. Of course, there have been many ruses from United this summer. Were there any bigger ruses than David Moyes' interview afterwards when he said, "Now I know why we're champions"? Yeah. All right, mate. It was pretty terrible from United, Picked up in the second half. Definitely couldn't have got any worse, could it? But once again, out-battled in midfield. And, you make fun of Lucas all you want, but he's done Michael Carrick over like a kipper time and time again.
Carrick with a woeful performance in that game. I think maybe he even got Twitter Man of the Match. No, it was Evra that got Twitter Man of the Match. But Carrick was definitely one of the 3 nominees chosen by Gary Pallister and someone else. And that just looks like mental illness to suggest that. The kind of game that makes Carrick haters hate Carrick. I mean, those people are crazy too, but, it's that type of performance, isn't it?
Well, it's totally passive. He just wants too much time on the ball, and he wasn't given it. And, Liverpool have found him out, and they keep doing it, and Carrick hasn't been able to adjust. And having Carrick Cleverly in there doesn't help him. Cleverly's just way too safe in possession, not able to help United move forward in the way they needed to. Of course, another thing that happened to United, a lot of long balls, and Rio was knocking long balls forward quite a lot because they're really static through midfield and there just weren't enough options. It was just generally all round not a good game.
And we talked about it last week, but once again, Ferdinand and Vidic sit really deep. Carrick and Cleverly get sucked really deep. Loads and loads of room between Carrick and Cleverly and the forward players. Valencia came on at right back when Phil Jones got injured and got forward a lot. I was really confused for a second because it looked like he was playing as a winger and not doing a particularly good job of it. People got very, very excited when Nani came on for Ashley Young, which was like, you've all seen Nani, right? You know what's probably most likely to happen now. Ashley Young getting in the starting lineup. Shinji Kagawa not getting a look in again. I mean, really, really disappointing performance. Loads of disappointing decisions in terms of the selection and the substitutions. Not a good look for David Moyes that game. And then to come out afterwards. I mean, to be fair, after we got beat 4-1, Fergie said we were the better side as well. So, he's pulling a full Ferguson in his post-match interview there.
Yeah, Ferguson had the credibility to do that. He's got 13 titles behind him.
Yes.
David Moyes does not. No one takes him seriously when he says that. Ashley Young, just unbelievably poor. Just unbelievably poor. Yeah, so disappointing that it's just that bad again from him, and Kagawa can't get anywhere near the team. Doesn't look good for him, does it? And you just hope that once he gets a bit of fitness and gets rid of this injury, there are rumours going around now that he's got an injury, and that he gets a look in. I think there are tactical reasons why he's not going to be used in the way that he would like to be, but at the moment can't even get on the bench, and Moyes said straight up that he picked Nani ahead of Kagawa for the bench.
Just doesn't bear thinking about, does it?
Well, especially since Bootner got on the bench.
Seen lots of people suggesting that the signing of Fellaini is good news for Kagawa because having the bolstered strength in the centre of midfield will give him more opportunity to play slightly lighter weight forward players. Hope that one turns out to be true. We've had a belter of an email from Flat Cat Sam. People who won't brook criticism, look away now. This is properly grumpy stuff here. It's called Moyes the Project. So it begins. From Ferguson's red and white army to David Moyes' mediocrity, a slow, painful decline instead of quality or potential, bringing the ordinary, the unexceptional. The coaching staff is all sorted. Moyes, Round, Woods, proven mediocrity. Did well with limited resources? No, not a team you'd want to watch week in, week out. Bring in Fellaini and keep Young, oh dear. So sod off David Moyes. You play like Sexton's boys. We'll be bored. I pray they admit the mistake, get rid by Christmas, bring in Ole, bring in some flair. Hugs from Flat Cat Sam, watching United since the 60s, old, grumpy and getting grumpier.
Ouch.
I don't necessarily agree with all of that, but I thought it was a beautifully misanthropic email.
So United Grump from now on will be called.
Yeah, so if you want to send a kind of really poetic and moving tribute to David Moyes and his potential future at United to redress the balance, please do so.
Look, I hope he's successful. I have a very clear idea of how he's going to play his teams because, we have 10 years of it. We'll see. Maybe he'll adapt. Maybe suddenly Marouanne Fellaini will turn into the next Cesc Fabregas. Maybe he won't. I think the dogs of war are what we're going to be this year. And in many ways that's not so bad because we've lacked a bit of fight. Certainly lacked a bit of fight against Liverpool on Sunday. In games like that, it's going to be useful to have the big unit in there, but can't get past the fact that it's been an awfully embarrassing summer, and kind of rounded off by that terrible day on Monday, which just capped off a terrible weekend, didn't it, with the loss to Liverpool. Anyway, could it get any worse? Yes, it could, because it's International Week, so we get to watch England twice.
Yeah, absolutely. Boo! It's International Week. No Rantcast next week, listeners, because we can't bring ourselves to spend an hour talking about United's players and their international trips. But yeah, United's squad jetting off all around the world, including the new boy, Fellaini going to meet up with Belgium. A lot of United's England contingent out, of course. Phil Jones is injured as karmic retribution for destroying the face of Wayne Rooney.
Yes, not the first time Rooney's had gash on his face.
Oh dear. I think that joke is below you. Or at least I would if I didn't know you so well.
Horrible. Have you seen the pictures?
Yeah, I have. One of the problems with having Twitter clients instead of using the web interface is that it shows you a little thumbnail of the picture, so I couldn't avoid it. Horrible. Poor lad.
Yeah, whatever. Brownie points to Phil Jones. Well done, mate.
Nice one, Jonesy. My friend Joe saying that Fellaini's only come to United because he doesn't want to ever have to play against Phil Jones again, but now he's slightly concerned about the training.
That was friendly fire, or maybe not quite so friendly. Anyway.
So, talking of not so friendly fire, sorry to interrupt, Robin van Persie, there's a story in the Daily Star citing pals and a friend of Robin van Persie saying that he's not happy with David Moyes. I suspect that this is complete nonsense fabricated by a newspaper that's been frustrated by 25 years of threats from Sir Alex Ferguson. We're going to see a lot of that sort of thing over the year ahead, I think.
Well, yes, the Daily Star last year caught out fabricating an entire journalist. Publishing stories from someone who didn't exist. So let's take that one with a pinch of salt. Final interesting story of the week, I suppose. I'd forgotten about this one until a friend reminded me. Marouanne Fellaini had an affair with Wayne Rooney's nasty rotter of a cousin a few years ago, Natalie Rooney. Wonder whether there'll be a little bit of tension on the training ground with that one.
Oh dear. It's all so messy, isn't it?
Described Fellaini as massive, and I think we know what that means, folks. The longest in the shower? Oh, yes.
Yes, he does have quite big hair. So, the international break, I can't think of anything useful or interesting to say about it, really. Sort of the idea of actual football. It's a real shame that there's an international break, because I would like to see Fellaini in the United shirt and, against Crystal Palace.
Well, he will be playing for the Red Devils this weekend.
He will, of course. The Twitter bio of great confusion, Marouanne Fellaini. He had Everton and Belgium and Red Devils in his Twitter bio for a long time and had to add brackets, nickname of Belgium international team because of all the speculation linking with us. But now we can just delete all that and just have Red Devils in there.
Nothing interesting in the international break, so we're going to miss next week.
Yeah.
We always take a week off. Normally it'd be this week, but hey, we flipped it around so we can have a moan for an hour and a bit about the transfer window. And we'll be back after the Crystal Palace game. So very briefly on Crystal Palace, you'd expect United to win, wouldn't you? Crystal Palace, who managed to sign not one player like United, not two players if you want to include a youth player, not three if you want to include the other youth player, but 15 players this transfer window.
Yeah, they've been busy in action. I'm not sure their 15 signings add up to one Fellaini in quality levels, but, they've definitely strengthened. And, I am one of those people who enjoys the comedic stylings of Ian Holloway. I quite liked his touchline jig in front of Paolo Di Canio, who's quite amusing, given Di Canio's touchline antics. They got their first win. Of course, you would expect United to have too much of them. And I hope that they're a cure for the summertime blues, that game after the disastrous transfer window. And I'm going to predict, 3-0 win to us?
Yeah, all right. I think I may have made a prediction or a bet with a colleague of mine on this one. So I'm going to go 3-1 United. So I guess that's it from us this week. We hope we haven't depressed you too much.
It'll all be fine. We'll be fine. United will be fine this season. We might not win the league, but you can't win the league every year. And I think ultimately lessons will be learned and in the end it'll be all right. But think that any kind of analysis of the summer transfer window that doesn't conclude that United have conducted themselves disastrously is just bizarre. So if we're going to talk about it, we're going to have to lay our cards on the table about how we feel about it.
Very good. And so we'll see you in a fortnight's time.
Have a lovely 2 weeks.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.